Bo Nix's hefty cost at quarterback 9 is one of the riskier draft picks in 2025. We tell you why, plus hit on the other top storylines for the Denver Broncos entering this season on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL, fantasy, and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today, we are going to be talking about all things Denver Broncos, getting into their biggest fantasy football storylines entering this season. And of course, the biggest, most impactful player will be Bo Nix entering his second season. Can he take a step forward? Or, we might see a sophomore slump because of what a great rookie season he did have and how efficient he was. But he's going very early in drafts. And then you have a very confusing backfield now that they decided to sign JK Dobbins. It seemed pretty easy with them drafting RJ Harvey in the second round. But now it might be a split backfield, making it hard to know who's worth the value. And then, of course, Courtland Sutton had a big year in the first year with Bo Nix. But is he worth his current draft cost at wide receiver 23? These are all things we're going to get into today. Let's start with Bo Nix. He's currently ranked as the quarterback 9, ahead of quarterbacks like Justin Herbert and Brock Purdy and Jared Goff and Caleb Williams and Justin Fields and even like a Dak Prescott. Now, he was the quarterback 8 in points per game last season at 18.7. He had a monster week 18 game that kind of skews those numbers a little bit against the backups of the Chiefs, who are not trying to win whatsoever. So from weeks 1 through 17, still the quarterback 10, but 17.7 points per game. So that's a whole point per game less than, on a season. What are your thoughts about his ranking, Vinny? Because personally, I think it's a bit too high.
Yeah, last year he kind of snuck up on fantasy players, right? I mean, it's not like anyone was consistently recommending, hey, put Bo Nix in your lineup or saying, hey, draft Bo Nix. He's a sleeper, right? But if you'd played Bo Nix consistently, I don't know if there was a lot of people who did, unless they were in 2 quarterback or super flex leagues. I think in those formats you were thrilled because you had a plug and play guy that you could sit, even best ball, that you just could rely upon to score. But when we look at kind of the weekly grind of one quarterback, he didn't come up all that often because we didn't always trust his matchup. We didn't trust his weapons, but he was compiling enough with his running and passing to end up as a top 12 QB in fantasy. Now it's the revenge of all these other guys behind, right? I think that's what's going to be tough to say that Bo Nix is a value here, because you rattled off all those guys where you think Justin Herbert could have a big potential this year. You talk about some of those steals later. I mean, Jared Goff, I don't know why he's not in the spot as well. I mean, he was a surprise guy last year, but there were reasons to drop Goff here because of the schedule and things to come down to earth. I think Nix does help himself by giving a little bit of running production that could really help him, but he's not a full-out cheat code quarterback in that sense. So I think he's there. He's just not very exciting to take. And I'm not sure that there's a, quote, next step yet in this offense of Sean Payton and Joe Lombardi. Is it there yet? I don't know. It could be kind of more status quo or kind of just better in terms of reality. I think they'll also be more efficient running the ball this season. They did have some potential with their run blocking, so I think they want to be a little bit more balanced, take pressure of the quarterback. It's not like you're banging the table all that much for his weapons just by adding Evan Engram right to the mix. So I'm not sure. I think this could be a case where those specific numbers to fantasy taper off. He could actually be a better reality quarterback and make the Broncos even a little bit more competitive here. But in terms of fantasy, I think those numbers could drop. And keep in mind, the Broncos also have a good defense. They could win some grindy type games here if their running game produces. So there may be some situations where you're not going to see Nix explode again like he did in that meaningless game late in the season in week 18. So again, he's just not exciting there. When you think of the upside or the steadiness that Purdy might have, I think he's a tough guy because he neither has a high ceiling or a high floor. And those two guys are extremely hard to draft, especially at that high of a cost.
Yeah, I know that's the biggest worry, right? It's like, what is his ceiling to put the risk of taking him at quarterback 9? It's like he had 3 games as a top 5 fantasy quarterback last year, 3 weeks, and one of those were week 18 again against the backups against the Chiefs, and most people don't play in week 18. He only had 5 games inside the top 10, and that's where he's being drafted. Like, if you only get 5 top 10 finishes with only 3 in the top 5 and you're taking him at quarterback 9, and with the risk of him having a sophomore slump, I mean, throwing 29 touchdowns as a rookie and then putting 4 more touchdowns on the ground, he, tied for the lead on the team. I could definitely see his numbers going down a bit. His average yards per attempt are very low. We have to see if he's able to throw down the field more, but Sean Payton likes those low yardage attempts, right? What is promising is that he did have 430 rushing yards. That was 8th among quarterbacks. So if he's going to keep running, that's cool. But he also still did have plenty of games where he barely ran. I mean, there was games with 3 yards, 9 yards, 4 yards, -5, 5, 5, 4. So it's not like you can play him in any given week saying, okay, I'm going to get 30 to 40 rushing yards from him and feel good about that. That's just not really the case. Can he do it? Sure. But also many games he's doing nothing. Also, his home road splits were so drastic, average 21 points per game at home, 16 points per game on the road. And you brought up the backfield. I mean, it was so bad last year. The backfield should be scoring, being able to be used more near the end zone. They should be better on the ground with RJ Harvey and JK Dobbins. And also the Broncos defense should be so good as well, meaning that Bo Nix probably won't have to throw as much if they can trust the run game more and they have a good defense. All of these worries, I cannot draft him at quarterback 9 off the board.
Yeah, I think there's some parallels. As you were talking, I was thinking about Jordan Love, another guy in a good offensive system. He compiled the touchdowns that were there, right? He scored a few more on the ground than we expected. And then the rushing totals, look, it's not like he's a designed runner the way that Jaden Daniels or Lamar Jackson or even Josh Allen is from time to time. He was more a necessity runner where they didn't have a lot. He had to scramble to protect himself and add the yards that way. That's a typical thing that we see with rookie quarterbacks where, hey, they're in trouble. All my checkdowns don't work. I'm going to be the check down and run. And then just looking at it, I mean, the consistency wasn't there in terms of the spikes were there, much like Jordan Love. He had a few spike games that kind of lifted up some of those dud games. So again, you're not going to get consistency to say he's a floor guy. And I don't know, maybe last year in terms of fantasy for the time being, until we see him take another big leap here in a few years, that might be ceiling for a while, adding 30 plus touchdowns. So I'm a little concerned maybe he peaked too early, that we don't want to invest there, especially when there's some guys that are in store for some bigger rebounds and can really easily outscore him with things falling into place.
Yeah, I mean, I already brought up a bunch of guys I like behind him, and Herbert, Purdy, and Caleb Williams, and even Justin Fields and Dak Prescott. But this reminds me of last year, right? Completely different type of players. But last year, Anthony Richardson was going so high, and Jaden Daniels was going later. And we said, if you want a guy like Anthony Richardson, they have similar risk and similar upside. Just take Jaden Daniels later. I think that's the same thing with Bo Nix and JJ McCarthy, right? Both were really good play callers, both in a good system. JJ McCarthy can get the 300 to 400 yards and scrambles. And we saw Sam Darnold thrive in the system last year and never thrived before. I just think you could take JJ McCarthy as a quarterback 20 or Bo Nix as a quarterback 9. I don't think they're in that different of situations. I don't think they have that different of ceilings, and I don't think they have that different of floors. So if I want a guy like Bo Nix, I'm just going to wait 6 rounds later and take JJ McCarthy.
Yeah, it's just very difficult with these superior system quarterbacks. I'm not knocking them to be system quarterbacks because every quarterback plays in a system, but the guys that have the biggest support, like a Matt LaFleur or Sean Payton, or in the case of McCarthy having Kevin O'Connell, where everyone seems to just produce fantasy numbers in that offense in Minnesota. There's just some offenses that are more conducive to setting up a nice environment for putting up numbers. So again, all things have to kind of happen right for Bo Nix, and I think those other guys can have a few things go wrong and still be okay producing. So yeah, I'm okay. I mean, JJ McCarthy, I think, is a very hot sleeper that we will get into more and more as we get closer to the season. We will get more into The Broncos backfield, it seemed to be a little bit easy to figure out here with the Javonte Williams gone, with the RJ Harvey being drafted, but then they added another guy with 2 initials, JK Dobbins, complicating the situation here late before training camp. So we'll get into that, and then we'll look at the wide receiver core before we end today's show on the Broncos. All right, we'd like to welcome a new sponsor to Locked On Fantasy Football. It's Rugiet. That's right, Rugiet. You've heard of Viagra or Cialis, guys. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when that moment is right. And really, traditional options haven't worked. Rugiet might be the answer for you. More than 150,000 men have already made the switch. You can even read their customer reviews on their site. It's helping a lot of people feel more confident and present in the moment. It's easy to order Rugiet right now. Just go to rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL to get 15% off today. So it's Rugiet, rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL and use the promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Get Rugiet ready only at Rugiet. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law but are not FDA approved and do not go through FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. All right, Michelle, it is time to look at this backfield. And there's been conflicting reports, I'm going to say, that we're reading about these guys. I know it's early and you can't really tell a lot until we get in training camp. But right now you have RJ Harvey ranked at RB25, of JK Dobbins at RB56. Last year, I think it's kind of a bum deal for Dobbins. He was an RB2, solidly RB18 with the Chargers. So he switches addresses in the AFC West, gets into a worse situation. What do you do with this backfield? Because I think it has a lot of potential, and it's hard to know because we didn't see Javonte Williams take full advantage of it.
I know it's so hard now that they signed JK Dobbins. Now, it was first reported that they gave Dobbins a 1-year, $5 million contract, which I think would have been a pretty big deal because that would have been a lot of cash to give a guy for 1 year at running back. And it would seem like they felt the need to add him. Now, it turns out it was $2.1 million contract with an additional $3.2 million in incentives. So if he hits certain numbers, so very different. So this is a very tiny contract, right? And when you look at Dobbins, I mean, he was way better than anyone expected last year. He was a running back 18 and average scoring among running last year with the Chargers. I will say his numbers did go down. Like he was dominant to the first couple weeks, and then it kind of faded off. I mean, what's crazy is that on the season, JK Dobbins averaged 4.6 yards per carry, right? And you're like, wow, that is really good. And he's been really good in yards per carry throughout his career. But from weeks 1, if you just take out weeks 1 and 2 and use weeks 3 through 18, the rest of the season, he averaged 3.8 yards per carry. So it goes from a really good season to a horrendous yards per carry season. And so we did see the drop off after his first 2, great weeks. And you just worry with all of his knee issues and injuries that maybe he doesn't have it in him to make it a full season. We also saw he still missed 4 games last year. So he's going to miss time, as he always does. They're paying him little. So I think that still makes me feel better about RJ Harvey, who they did spend a second round pick on. I mean, that's not cheap. They went really early on RJ Harvey. He had great production at Central Florida, putting up over 1,600 scrimmage yards each of the last 2 seasons, 25 touchdowns this last season, incredibly explosive with great bursts, and no running back in the FBS average or had more runs of 10 plus yards percentage wise than Harvey last year. And I do think he's ready to go right away because he's already 24 years old. So if you're not going to use him now, when are you going to use him? So I am still on the RJ Harvey train. I just don't feel as confident about him as I did before Dobbins. But I do think the RB25, if he stays at that price, I think that's plenty fair.
Yeah, and that's also a good price for him because we can't trust Dobbins to stay healthy. I mean, last year already missing time, different type of injury, but still missed time. I mean, he just has had so much wear over the years, and you saw that kind of Baltimore, right? He flashed, he comes out of the gate fast, and then things start to slow down for him because he's a bit dependent on the touchdowns and the explosive plays, and if they get bottled up a little bit, that's it, right? He's done, and he's not going to produce that steady kind of guy that's going to pound and take it in between. That's why they had Gus Edwards on the team. That's why they also felt with the Chargers, they had to upgrade to Omarion Hampton and Najee Harris. So I don't think it's nearly that situation, the Chargers one, like this one. I think this one is more they needed contingency just in case RJ Harvey wasn't completely ready. Dobbins does. Again, the little things right, and sometimes you need one of those guys. I think very similar to that Nick Chubb signing behind Joe Mixon. Sometimes teams just get the veteran depth, and it's not like people were rushing to go get Dobbins. There was like, oh, it's a comeback player of the year candidate. Oh yeah, he's got some upside. We remember now from his Ravens days. It was not like people were like, okay, we want to go get this guy and put him in the lead. It wasn't last year's running back free agent class with Saquon Barkley and the like, nothing close to that. So when you look at it, Harvey is a significant investment. I think he reminds them more. If you're going to compare these backs to Peyton and Lombardi's past, you'd say this is more of the back that you're looking at to be potential Alvin Kamara in this offense. Catch some passes, get in the open field, use the quickness, and do that. And Dobbins is a very good backup in that style. I think that's what it tells you as well. Dobbins wouldn't necessarily be like, oh, you're going to pound him between the tackles and put Harvey as the guy that you're going to put in there. So I think what you're looking at is that Harvey is going to get the first crack to get this. I think you'll see some touches by Dobbins early, but then the durability could come into play, and then Harvey could take over. So if he's going after all the RB2s, I think he can be real value here. At least he's a flex play, even with Dobbins on the field. So you're not really overpaying too much at RB25, but you can end up with a really nice pickup here. And he could be the guy that finishes where Dobbins did last year as a Charger around RB16 to 18.
Yeah, and what's nice about, the addition of JK Dobbins for Harvey is that it's not like Dobbins is known to be a receiving back. That's never been his strength. And Sean Payton, his offense loves to pass to the running backs. It wasn't just with Alvin Kamara. Since he's been the Broncos head coach over the last 2 seasons, there's no team that has targeted the running back position more than the Broncos. 270 targets to running backs over the last 2 years with Sean Payton. So plenty of targets to go around to these running backs. The one downside is maybe Dobbins is the goal line back while he's healthy, because Harvey is smaller at 5'8", 205 pounds. But again, like his athletic ability, 4'4", 40, 38-inch vert, he is just explosive. I do expect him to have the lead, to be the lead back of this team, lead this team in receptions in the backfield. And again, last year, Javonte Williams was second on this team in targets. Harvey could do that. It's not like they added a ton of guys this year. They added Evan Engram, who we'll talk about later, but he has a great opportunity. And running back 25, when he's going around, Aaron Jones and Tony Pollard and Isaiah Pacheco. Yeah, there's other guys here that also have potential in Quinshon Judkins. Maybe you want to take a shot on Judkins or Caleb Johnson. But if I'm looking at the other vets, I would rather Harvey than Pollard or Jones or Pacheco.
Yeah, I would circle all those rookies in that range. I would say put a highlighter, a big star, whatever you want on your rankings, because those are going to be your best values there for sure. I mean, they're all situations that are promising. And this also, if you're drafting now or doing different leagues, formats, this is the best probably value you're going to get for some of those younger backs. Is we're going to start seeing more and more of their role and indication of that in training camp and preseason, and their value is slowly going to go up because they're all impressive young backs. So keep that in mind. This is a good time to attack some of that. But yeah, I wouldn't be too worried about Dobbins. I'm not going to go nuts to say I need to have him as a backup handcuff to Harvey either, because of his durability issues and receiving limitations. So again, stick with Harvey. Don't freak out just because a team signs a veteran off injured back very late in free agency.
And I think by the time we hit late August, Judkins and Caleb Johnson's cost is going to increase because they're going to be known as the starters for their teams, while people are still going to be worried about JK Dobbins with Harvey and the Broncos. So I don't actually expect his cost to increase very much at all. So I do think at the end of the day, Harvey might be the best value among these rookies if those guys' values go up. We have one more big storyline to hit on for the Broncos to close up their series here, and it's Courtland Sutton. I mean, he really surprised us last year in his first year with Bo Nix. It was a long time coming since he did anything, in receiving yards, but he had his 1,081 receiving yards and 8 touchdowns. So is he worth his draft cost at wide receiver 23? And do we want to take a shot on Evan Engram? Those are 2 things we'll talk about to finish up today's show after we hear from one of our sponsors. Have you ever checked your bank account and wondered, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO. It gives you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I just realized how much I was spending on food delivery. And now I budget much smarter and save more. Plus, managing money with my partner has never been smoother. We're able to track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at Monarch Money for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. All right, we have 2 big guys, receivers for the Broncos, and not a whole else, a lot more besides that, unless you want to take a shot on Marvin Mims here. But Courtland Sutton was the wide receiver 27 in average scoring last year, 11.8 points per game. That was a shocker. He wasn't going anywhere around that, right? So he was a good value last year. But now he's being drafted even earlier than that. So people expect an even better season from him at wide receiver 23 rank. And a lot of the reasons why we're a little bit skeptical on Bo Nix, I think you can kind of use that on Sutton. It's not to say his ranking is outrageous, but if we expect the defense to be great, we expect less, throwing from Bo Nix. They added Evan Engram, who could take targets away. They have a better backfield to actually run the ball. These are all concerns for Courtland Sutton, who, yes, overall had a really good season, but at the end of the day, in the games where he had at least 9 targets, yeah, he was great. He had 14.2 points per game in those 10 games is what he averaged. But in the other games, the 6 games where he didn't have 9 targets, he had 8 or fewer, it was only 8.2 points per game. It just feels like his targets probably will go down this year.
Yeah, the good thing about this receiver is he makes a lot of big plays and he can score, and that can make up for sometimes not getting the ball or seeing the targets come his way. I've always liked his kind of skill set out of SMU. He's kind of old school in terms of being able to use his size and then stretch the field and also be targeted in the red zone. The one thing that could really save him is the chemistry with Bo Nix here that's developing, because look, they've got some other people on this roster, right? I mean, they're younger receivers, but you look at this team, there's 61 vacated wide receiver targets, so there is some room to be spared there. I think with Engram, a lot of it is going to be making up and having a little bit of bump from what we saw with the tight ends last year. So I also think they have different purposes in the offense here. Engram, we know, is not a big touchdown scorer. That's not his thing. It's more moving the chains and like keeping things in the short to intermediate routes going. Well, Sutton can score. Sutton can make big plays. They want to stretch the field a little bit with him. So he's a receiver, again, that doesn't need a lot. I think he's kind of a more polished version of a DK Metcalf, that he can make some plays downfield and doesn't need a lot to work with here to make it happen, especially because he uses his body well in the end zone for scoring position. So I do quite like him here. I think his cost, I think it's very good. I mean, down the stretch last year, the second half, he was the average wide receiver 14. So he really revved up. I know that includes that big game from Nix in week 18, but I think there was just something indicating there that they really found themselves and the chemistry was there. So I really compare it a lot to what developed between Terry McLaurin and Jaden Daniels. I think that was an effect here to bump up the value of Sutton. So I think it's going to be okay. And I think he's one of the better receivers. You know pretty much what you're going to get from him. You know the style of receiver he is. Again, he can be higher and finish well into the wide receiver 2s versus right near the end at wide receiver 23.
Now, are you worried about Evan Engram stealing targets from Sutton? And is Evan Engram a good value in drafts? Because right now he's sitting at tight end 9. Last year, I mean, it was an injury just a throwaway year for him. The year prior to that, he was the tight end six in points per game with Jacksonville in 2023. However, he had 143 targets. I do not expect him to get close to that with the Broncos. And really, I mean, he's been pretty pointless for fantasy outside of his rookie season in 2023. And he's not a touchdown scorer at all. At least he wasn't with his first two teams with the Giants and the Jaguars. Maybe that changes with the Broncos. But there is some concerns. I mean, again, Javonte Williams was second on this team last year in targets with 70. And Courtland Sutton had very little competition for targets. I do think Evan Engram brings in competition for targets.
Yeah, again, their roles are different enough where I think Sutton will still get unique targets from Engram. Again, they're just different type of players at this point. If they were like two slot receiver, or say Sutton was a slot receiver and he was battling with Engram, then we would have some concerns, right? But again, they made it work a little bit with Christian Kirk and Evan Engram there in Jacksonville. So again, I think there's one ball plenty to go around, especially with some still youthful concerns at the other wide receiver spots. So that kind of helps, right? Where Engram is more making up for not having the reliability at the number 2, number 3 yet. You're on this team. I mean, after the Jerry Jeudy move. So I do think that Engram is more there to replace what they lost a little bit in Jeudy, right? Working in the middle of the field, getting open, being that intermediate target that we know we can trust here. But I think Sutton, in terms of getting cut into by Engram, I don't think it's going to happen as much, because I think they have different purposes. Engram is just there also to clean up some of their mess at tight end that they've had. They've tried to make things work with the Greg Dulcich and Adam Troutman and all these guys that they've tried to shuffle in and make things happen. I think they want the tight end to be impactful. He's also getting up there, and he's had some major injuries, and he could slow down a bit here. So I think Sutton will be fine. I think independently Engram could also be a pretty good value here. But again, you're going to look at Engram more in half and full point PPR, because you're just not going to get – he's just going to line up as a red zone target. It's not like throwing back to Jimmy Graham with Sean Payton and Lombardi. It's not like that. But you'll get a guy that's going to get some targets, be involved in the offense. It may not be all that exciting, but again, I think he could be rather steady in this offense, given that, again, Marvin Mims and some of these other guys are just total volatile wild cards.
Yeah, I think looking at his ranking at tight end 9, there's just other guys behind him that I'd rather take a shot on. So he won't be on many of my teams. But if he happens, to be on waivers throughout the year, he could be a steady waiver wire guy to get those receptions. Or if you're in a full PPR league, maybe you're more interested in him. Just the touchdowns are a bit scary. But that will be it for today's show. I want to thank you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Scouting. The NFL draft is over, but the roster moves and news never stop. Host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We will be back with you on Friday talking about the Las Vegas Raiders. Don't miss it. Talk to you then. Bye, y'all.